And on today's podcast, I'm delighted to welcome Renee, I have to pronounce this correctly, Fitton. How are you today, Renee?
I am so good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat about some of my favorite topics.
Wonderful. So let's get this started. So where are you right now on planet Earth?
I am actually currently in Sedona, Arizona at the moment. I don't typically
Sedona. Where
here,
is
but
that? Okay, sell Sedona because we have a product over here
oh,
in Ireland called Sidona, which is like an apple drink. So, but where is Sedona, Arizona?
Sedona, Arizona. It is actually just north of, if you know where Phoenix or Scottsdale is in Arizona, about 2 hours drive, and it's out in what you would think would be a desert, but it is still quite relatively lush. But they are really well known for these beautiful red rocks and canyons, and it is one of the most picturesque places I have ever been. They are relatively spiritual, very connected to the earth. All of the buildings like almost blend into the scenery. So it's a beautiful place.
You've sold it. You
Go
really
there?
have sold it. You have sold it. I'm packing my bags. In terms of temperature wise, so what's it like over there? I mean, make us jealous
Oh.
in Ireland and in Europe. Is it quite
Yes, it's very hot and it's only on the rise because we're still in spring technically out here, but it can get, dangerously hot, but right now it's in I would say like probably in about the 80s maybe.
okay? So in terms of lifestyle, so just to kind of give the listeners a little bit of background about your lifestyle, especially that environment. I mean, what would your kind of like go-to vibe in terms of relaxing and chilling out? Um, Go ahead, tell us anything like yoga, Pilates,
Yeah.
running
Well,
up
it's
hills.
funny that you asked that question because I've only been here for about a week and a half now. I
Okay.
used, for about a decade, I lived in Los Angeles and I just decided to become, a bit of more of a digital nomad in that I've been bouncing around. So I just got back from a month in Spain and a month in Portugal. And so, this is a little different. So my routines that I try and keep no matter where I am, are really from the moment I wake up, I will go and I go find a nice place to sit wherever I am. I do a bit of a gratitude journal for takes like 2 minutes. Then I do 10 minutes of breathing meditation, and then I do 5 minutes of manifestation meditation. And then I usually will go make a green tea matcha.
Okay.
And then I try and sneak in a workout. Occasionally, I'll have to wait until the afternoon, depending what my work schedule looks like. But that's going to be a day to day. But out here, the hiking is incredible. So I've been trying to get in a lot of really great hiking. I've been told about a really incredible myofascial massage guru out here. So it's kind of fun. It changes every day.
So what is a gratitude journal for anybody like myself who probably doesn't have much gratitude for anything? So what is a gratitude journal?
Oh, well, if you feel like you don't have gratitude for anything, then the gratitude journal is for you because
Okay.
no matter how big or small, it's just taking a moment every day to think of three things, or at least that's what I do. I have one, two, three written out, and I try to think something every day of something new, big or small, that I am grateful for. And I try not to repeat anything. So it can, you find yourself like, oh, well, I'm very grateful for my husband. Okay, well, you can't write that every single day. And so it's actually really cool because you start looking at some of these things that you might not have thought about being grateful before. And it really makes you realize how much you are, in fact, grateful for. And once you start really calling those things out, it does actually really, at least for me, and I know that there is actually some science out here on this, but it does improve. any anxiety that people, just generalized anxiety, might feel, just general positivity, kicking the day off on the right foot, and kind of just adding, for me, a lot of just motivation to start the day off right. So I have it's, I would say, for me, a relatively new ritual that I've added, and I cannot speak highly enough to it.
So do your friends and family, I mean, do they kind of go, oh, here's annoying Renee with her gratitude today? I mean, are they kind of on board with all this type of stuff?
I generally keep that stuff to myself unless I'm asked on a podcast in front of people. But it's something that you do generally alone in your own space, and it's I think that's kind of part of what makes it so wonderful is just stepping away from all the craziness of our day, from our phones, from everything that's constantly stimulating us, and having a moment to yourself and making it about yourself. And there's now a lot of even some cool stuff about transcendental meditation that's been being talked about more and more, I've noticed anyway. And they're all about having even your own word that you repeat through your meditation and not sharing that word with anybody. So in fact, it should really be this moment for yourself and not so much about bragging about how spiritual and connected you are, and rather just kind of taking a moment.
So when did all this kind of start? If we're going to go back to the beginning in relation to like well-being and health and gratitude, I don't like that gratitude stuff. But anyway, when did this all start for Rennie? I mean, was this from a young age? I mean, did you have an interest of this like in high school, college, university? So tell the listeners a little bit more about how Rennie is now today, kind of motivated about helping others, healthcare, well-being, and all that wonderful stuff.
Absolutely. Well, in fact, believe it or not, this was never my thing. In fact, I was kind of eye roll at a lot of this stuff for a long time. I have really rooted myself in science, and sometimes some of these less, hard science activities just seem to be so separated from science that it seems frou-frou and, crazy, for lack of a better word. So for a long time, I mean, I was pre-med, and that's pretty much what I thought I was going to do. I was very A-type. I still am. And was making very go, go, go and making sure that I was doing everything perfectly to get into the best med school. I ended up doing volunteer work in an emergency room. I volunteered in doing some, their medical missions essentially in South Africa and in Nicaragua. And as part of all of this, I really started understanding, the world of medicine and how we, especially in the Western world, like to treat, ailments of various sorts. And I started to recognize that it was really just very heavily focused on medications and what we generally recognize as medicine in the Western world. And it's like, okay, well, I absolutely appreciate that there is a very important value and need for all of these tools, but I feel like we could also weave in a little bit more of the lifestyle changes that are more long term, that when you leave somebody, once you've sewn them all up or sent them away with whatever medication you have, that's only going to last for so long before they go back to, possibly poor nutrition habits or a crazy sleep routine. And all of those things eventually will just bring you back into where you started. And so I started really spending a lot more time there. And once you start, it's really hard to turn your back on it. And I really wanted to be part of the solution in getting some of these more lifestyle changes out into the world. So I ended up getting my master's degree in longevity nutrition and became a registered dietitian. I studied under one of the longevity leaders of the world today, one of the top longevity researchers known as Dr. Walter Longo. And from there, really started to capture a lot of these super cool nutrition and lifestyle changes that can make a really big difference with relatively low lift. And I thought that that was something that pretty much anybody could take a grasp on. So, that's really where my journey started. And I started more with nutrition and things that that I could read about in scientific journals really readily. And then now, since I've started to just once you start, you start finding new fun things that you can add into your routine that help support. And for me, as an A-type person, I have, like my anxiety levels are probably higher than the average Joe. And so I find that doing some of these things really helps with that.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, did you find like when you were going through all your studies and you mentioned like kind of sewing up people and then kind of like on you go with traditional medicine, that what was the light bulb moment for you to kind of branch out further and kind of research more and kind of alternative type of stuff?
Well, the big light bulb moment was when I was traveling to, I think it was Nicaragua, and they had given us a really small allotment for what we could pack. And that didn't necessarily bother me. I was like, okay, sure, we just need to be light and on our feet and go, go, go between all these spots. But when I got to the airport, I realized that that space was because all of us each had to check two giant bags of medications.
Right.
And you're going into these remote areas and you're talking to people about some things that were, in fact, more lifestyle related, but still just, giving this band-aid approach that might not last very long. And you're not going back to these remote areas at least for a year, in some cases longer. And so it just felt weird, in some cases, yes, absolutely. You just needed, an antibiotic or something like that, that was just a single course and it was all done. But in other cases, there were, some smoke inhalation problems where you would have needed to go into their homes and help guide them on how to create a chimney so that they're not inhaling all of the smoke and other things that I just wanted to just dive in and look into more of these everyday lifestyle things that you could improve. And that was probably the most, at least I can visually picture all of those moments that I just described, and tell you exactly what that space looked like because it really stuck with me. And that was, I mean, now, gosh, maybe 20 years ago.
Wow. Okay. And your experience there, I mean, for anybody that's never been to Nicaragua, I mean, what is it like? I mean, other than what we've
Oh, it's
seen in the
beautiful.
media, it's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, we stayed in an area known as San Juan del Sur, which is a beach town. There's a lot of surfers. It's quite quiet. It's amazing. The food is incredible. We stayed with a host homes where they would even cook us breakfast in the home and send us off with little packed lunches as we went out. And it really was such a beautiful place. And I recommend it even if you're just going to visit. But then we would hop in to some, four all-wheel drive trucks out into drive anywhere from 2 to 5 hours out into these more remote areas where they really just didn't have access. And there would be one, maybe like a church or a community center where we would post up and there would be pretty much the entire community coming out. There were lines out the door for the entire day, just coming to get some care and support, which was it's really a beautiful thing. If anybody is interested in supporting Doctors Without Borders or any of those organizations, there's so many of them out there. I think it's an incredible opportunity that everyone should dive into.
And this drive that you have, I mean, to do these type of things, to go further. I mean, where does this all stem from? I mean, does your
Oh,
parents, does family members, does anybody else kind of like go, I'm off to Nicaragua to kind of save the world? I mean, where did this all come from yourself?
I think that it was a passion in science that then evolved into a passion for people. No matter where I am, I love to chat with people. I love to hear people's stories. I just like you ask incredible questions to your guests. Luckily, me one of them. I love to do the same and hear people's story. And so I truly this career choice that I've found for myself is that beautiful intersection of those two things. Getting to spend time with the science and unpacking some of these new discoveries that are changing every single day and evolving, and just kind of nerding out on some of that, but not sitting behind a computer and being away from the world, and instead getting to support people and helping them grow and to evolve. I mean, that to me, I think it fell on my lap, to be quite honest with you, and it just was the perfect fit. And once you find something you like and also are an A-type person that just likes to constantly grow and evolve and build on things, it was, I mean, it's just kind of been the natural fit. And it's part of my everyday morning manifestations to just keep it coming.
No, I think it's brilliant. I mean, because I think even with it's very hard to, from my point of view, is not many role models out there at the moment. But I think you are a very good role model, and for somebody to aspire to and look up to. So, well done you, and it's fascinating. I mean, I don't think I'd have the drive and determination, or even the brains. Never mind, or the gratitude. So let's move on then to.
I think that absolutely everybody can do this. I think it's just about finding that thing that you are passionate about. And that does take time. And you don't have to make money out of it either. Like I think this whole idea that your passion has to be your job, I don't always ascribe to that. I have many passions that are not my job. Escape rooms, for example, I'm not making that my job because that doesn't fit as my job. But I love the problem solving aspect of it. Now, you can, everybody can have many passions, and it's about figuring out which pieces of those passions can turn into something that you can turn into a career. And it's not always the obvious. So just try lots of things, and eventually it'll, as I mentioned, for me, it felt like it fell into my lap. It probably didn't, but that's what it felt like because I was just kind of following my gut in a lot of ways.
So you then went on. You mentioned about studying for the masters for the longevity nutrition. So in terms of explain somebody, so keep it like for dummies, and no disrespect to the listeners, rather than getting too deep at the moment. But what is that? What does that involve?
What is the master's in longevity specifically?
Well, pretty much the masters, and then moving on then to kind of what does it cover, and what does that bring then further down the road in terms of your education, but also how you can educate other people.
Absolutely. So it's a very intensive 2-year program where you are learning. So you already have to have your 4 years undergrad basic understanding of science, biology, chemistry, physics, all the good stuff, a little bit of nutrition. And then in this master's, you go really headfirst into the biochemistry of nutrition. How is our body working to take all of the food that we take, and how does it, kind of funnel each one of those nutrients into different areas to produce different results? And how do all of those things connect? And I look back to this one giant map that I once saw behind somebody that I was chatting with via Zoom type chat, and it was out of the view, and it was just millions and millions of pathways, just showing all of the pathways that are going on in the body and all of these crazy interconnectivities. And even in the 2 years that I spent really digging into this, I really only scratched the surface of what's going on inside of our body, but having that base understanding of especially some of the most important processes really helps you understand how some of the things that we do, that could be nutrition, but it can even be sleep and exercise, etc., how that relates to an outcome. So why when I sleep 8 hours, I actually feel better. Why when I eat maybe higher fat, I notice that I have more mental clarity. Why are those things happening? Once you understand that connectivity, it makes everything on the other side make a lot more sense and allows you to determine kind of the junk from the truth. And that in the world of nutrition is the toughest part because there is so much information. You have to be able to understand the underpinnings to determine whether what somebody is telling you has some validity. And then, of course, you also have to learn, and you learn a lot of this in a master's in longevity, how to read nutrition papers and scientific papers. Because if anybody's ever tried to read nutrition papers out there, they're long, they're dense. There's even for me, a lot of the time I have to go and look into some of these things that the author is talking about to make sure that I understand where they're getting at with this, and also who paid for it,
Yes.
who wrote it, and why they wrote it. Um, and asking some of these questions that are even outside of some of the full body of this paper, a lot of that actually is not as simple as it might seem. So that was a lot of what I learned there, but I was very lucky that I also got to travel to Italy to study under Dr. Walter Longo as part of this program as well, where we, of course, continued to spend time on some of the underpinnings and the biochemistry of nutrition, but specifically focusing on fasting and the ability for fasting to support with not just longevity, but also metabolic health and now there's over 40 clinical studies in this world of fasting mimicking, where you can get the benefits of fasting with food, and looking really especially at that. And some of the now, again, with the 40 clinical studies, I'd say there's probably about 12, 15 different areas of research here showing different benefits of that. So, really, that was kind of when I started really specializing in what I do now, which is longevity through fasting and fasting mimicking.
And the fasting then, I mean, we hear so much information there. I mean, you mentioned there already, there's different information out there about certain health kind of vibes or trends. But with the fasting, just to give the listeners a little overview, I mean, we hear different types. Is fasting kind of starving yourself? Or, is it controlled fasting in terms of you might eat for 8 hours and then don't eat for 10 hours? Or how does it work?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So, is fasting starving yourself? I've actually never been asked that question, but it's a very fair question. And I would say, in a way, yes, but in a way, no. Because when we go into a fasted state, what we are doing, and first we have to define what is a fasted state. How long do you have to quote unquote not eat before you're officially in a fasted state? Is it the moment you stop eating, you're fasting? Or do you have to reach 12 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours before you're considered in a fasted state? And to be completely honest, there's probably still a little bit of argument as to when that is. And it also depends on what definition of fasting you're using. When we look at the dictionary definition of fasting, it's essentially that you are not eating any food. And that hypothetically could happen the moment you finish your last bite from your meal, right? And the more physiological definition of fasting, when we start seeing real changes in your body because it starts getting alarm bells that, hey, you might be putting me in a state of starvation. That's usually starting around the 12-hour mark because that's when your body has used up all of the sugar that was floating around in your blood and also all of the sugar that was stored in your liver primarily. But that's really where we're tapping in for most of our sugar sources in that early time. That's the easiest places for our body to go. Once that's tapped out, then our body starts doing some work to go look for other areas to find energy, and it will go look to fat to go find energy there. And then it produces ketones. So for anybody who's heard of a ketogenic diet, it's really the process of trying to turn on that system of trying to get your body, instead of using sugar for energy, using fat for energy and creating ketones, which your brain really likes. It's kind of like a high octane fuel for your brain. Your brain also really likes sugar, so keep that in mind. There's a lot of back and forth there too. But at around that point, we start seeing transition into ketosis. And then if we go even longer, usually about 3 days or so, our body is in enough of a what we call a hormetic stress, which is known as a positive stress, that it starts to trigger something called autophagy, which is deep cellular cleanup. I like to think of it like a vacuum cleaner for our cells or like a spring cleaning at the cellular level. And it is able to produce some really impactful changes because if you think about it, 3 days of fasting in order to trigger this, we're not doing it very often. And for most people, we're almost never doing it at any like really significant capacity. And so our cells can accumulate a lot of this junk that just happens naturally as we age. Every day, the cellular components just start, not working as well, start breaking down. And we need to take time to go hunt those down and get rid of them. And ideally, in a significant amount so that we're not just doing little tiny amounts every single day when we're accumulating more than what we're able to clear out. So that is that I think a long way to answer that question, but I think it's important to know that fasting isn't just fasting or not fasting. It is how long have you fasted? And then we can then go into what are you eating, if anything, when you're fasting, and how does that change the results too?
So really, so in terms of anybody that's going to start, say, a fasting plan or if, whatever they're deciding to do, what usually are the kind of fallbacks when they fall off the ladder? Because you mentioned there about sugar, the brain just wants sugar, 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 and if you've had like lots of sugar, lots of kind of bad food, and all of a sudden then you come, I'm going to fast. So what's the typical kind of signs and symptoms for somebody that to get them over that initial hurdle to kind of say, look, no, you need to stick through, you need to keep at this because it might take a few days before the body begins to kind of realize, you can feed your fats now and not your sugar, so to speak.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I would say that most people find that the first day, it depends. So again, it depends if you're doing water only fasting or if you're doing fasting mimicking. And just to clarify, fasting mimicking is the ability to consume food and nutrition while your body is still getting into this fasted state. I'm a big believer in choosing fasting mimicking over water only fasting for many reasons that I'm going to talk about now, which are some of these barriers to entering fasting and some of the difficulties of fasting. So some of those difficulties that we see with fasting and especially water only fasting are going to be, of course, hunger. And if you're doing water only fasting, that that can happen, honestly, even at that 12-hour mark. It can happen even sooner, depending. But if you think about it, most people are going to go to bed. They're going to wake up. They're probably going to have fasted for at least 10 hours or so. And then they will probably be able to go maybe a few more hours before they're like, okay, no, I'm getting a little bit hungry. Now, that's probably the biggest hurdle. Usually we see if people are really committed and to water only fasting, they will get gradually hungrier, hungrier, hungrier until usually about day end of day two, middle of day three, and then they feel like they're kind of over the hump. And then you see that people can kind of coast through that. Now, with fasting mimicking, you get way less hunger because you're eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. I find that people just get really like light hunger, maybe again on day two or day three, but it's much reduced. And then again, kind of start coasting into it for through day 4 and 5. I wouldn't recommend much longer than that in terms of a total fast anyway. So.
Right. And in terms of how they might feel, I mean, just to kind of give an overview at the beginning, I mean, will they feel kind of tired, fatigued, lethargic, grumpy, a bit like myself most days? I mean, will they, is that probably the kind of the norm?
So it depends on the person. And it again also depends on the type of fast.
Yeah.
So if you have never fasted, even like 16 or 18 hours can be helpful. So if you fasted 16 or 18 hours, then your body has gotten used to switching fuel sources from going from burning sugar for fuel to burning fat for fuel. And if your body can get used to that, it really does make fasting a lot easier. And the more you get used to that and the more you train your body to do that, the easier it becomes. It's kind of like going to the gym. The first time you go to the gym, not fun. You're going to feel sore for 2, 3 days after. But the more you do it, the less sore you become, and you can actually go deeper into your workout. Same thing applies here with fasting. But if you've never done it before, that can be uncomfortable. And some of those discomforts that we see are going to be things like lightheadedness, maybe a little bit of a headache. And these are all symptoms that we call the keto flu. So it can feel a little bit, I think flu is a bit of an aggressive statement. It's very seldomly that bad. And it's generally short-lived. But with, for example, the fasting mimicking diet, that where you add food again reduces that drastically. So we've done a lot of studies on fasting mimicking and these what they call adverse events. And they show in pretty much every single study that I have seen that there are no significant adverse events. So there maybe you get like a light headache for 30 minutes and then it disappears, or maybe you get lightheaded for 30 minutes and then it disappears. So it's really quite short-lived and quite easy to push through. But that it's not to say that you won't experience any of that.
Right. And in terms of the fasting mimicking, what are probably, well, the overall health benefits? Are we talking about weight loss? Why do people do this? Is it because they're kind of just tired of why do you put yourself through this pain? Honestly, I mean, honestly, why? So, I mean, is it just generally that they want to lose a bit of weight, or they're feeling a bit sluggish, they're on like all these breads and carbs and all that type of stuff that they kind of like, I've had enough of this now. What's the general reason behind it, and what are the health benefits?
Now, this is the funnest part, and it should explain why you would even bother to do something that doesn't necessarily sound like the most fun, right?
Yeah.
Now, we in the 40 plus clinical studies that have been done in fasting mimicking, and I'm going to focus on fasting mimicking because I do strongly believe that it is the better, safer alternative to water only fasting. We have been able to show, yeah, of course, weight loss. Weight loss is part of it. But one, it's the right kind of weight loss. And two, it's one of many benefits. What do I mean when I say the right kind of weight loss? With fasting mimicking, we're able to show that you drop fat mass while protecting your muscle mass. This is so important for long-term health results. It's important for longevity. And who doesn't want to keep their muscle just even for looking good? But beyond that muscle is many people are now calling it the primary organ of longevity because it is so important for our long-term health. So in terms of the kind of fat that you're losing and the kind of weight that you're losing, this is one of the best options, even when compared to the Mediterranean diet. This was a clinical study that was done. One of the best diets that are out there today. I'm actually a big fan of it myself, but when done over very long periods of time, this study was done over a 4 month period where people made a diet change every single day for 120 days to the Mediterranean diet. They showed some good results on heart health metrics and weight loss, but when looking at the kind of weight loss, they saw that there was significant muscle loss along with the fat loss. Whereas the fasting mimicking diet that was done only 5 days a month for that 4 month period showed that there was the same significant cardiometabolic results, the same significant weight loss results, but that the weight was purely fat and no muscle. So this is really, really important when we talk about weight loss, that we're getting the right kind. Now, beyond weight loss, I mentioned autophagy earlier, that we're able to trigger this deep cellular cleanup. When we work at the deep cellular level, our cells are essentially the root of everything. They're the very beginning of all of our organ systems. So when we work from that level, we're really able to do a lot. So from skin health, where we've been able to show that there was improvements in skin texture, fine lines, skin hydration, even with just only 5 days of this program. We've been able to show improvements in metabolic health. So, pretty much anything that your doctor is testing when you go in for your annual physical, which I do strongly recommend everybody does annual physicals. You will do a blood pressure exam, you'll do a cholesterol, you'll do triglycerides, you'll do your blood sugar metrics. All of those will improve with fasting mimicking as well, even in healthy individuals, meaning that this is also really supportive for prevention. We've done a really cool study on biological age. So this is not the age on your birth certificate that tells you, how many years you've lived on this planet, but rather the age that your body is behaving. And it turns out that your biological age can be younger than your chronological age. And with the fasting mimicking diet, they were able to show that with just 3 cycles, that's 5 days a month for 3 months in a row, they were able to reverse biological age by 2.5 years
Wow.
on average. Yeah. And in that same study, they also looked what happens if somebody does this 3 times a year. That's it. Total of 15 days a year for a 20-year period. They were able to show an 11-year biological age reversal.
Wow.
And then they also looked at, okay, well, this is pretty cool. What else can we see if you were to do this just 15 days a year for a 20-year period in terms of chronic disease risk reduction? Looking at things like the top killers today, things like diabetes, cancer, heart disease, um, cerebrovascular disease, things like that. How much risk reduction could you see? And even in healthy people, they showed anywhere from 6 to 25% risk reduction. And then if any of those people had any of those markers out of range, maybe they were already, veering in the wrong direction, they showed that increase to about 10 to 35% risk reduction. So this is really incredible. Healthy, maybe not as healthy, regardless, incredibly beneficial. And what's really cool is that for those that might need to adjust any of their health markers, it's even more impactful. So,
I mean, that
very cool.
was very, very good explanation and overview. So, as we're chatting here, and we're going to move on to that part now, you mentioned a 5-day plan. So, I'm
Mhm.
on prolonlife.com. So, generally, um, for anybody listening to this, what does the 5-day plan consist of, and how does it work?
Yeah. So what you're bringing up is the ability to get the 5-day fasting mimicking diet completely designed for you, delivered to your door, kit has absolutely everything you need. All you need to have on hand is water. There's 2 companies doing that. The one that you mentioned right here, which is Prolon, and then there's also a company called L-Nutra Health. It's L Nutra Health. Those 2 companies will drop a box at your door. It has 5 individual days boxes with absolutely everything that you need inside. And these are real meals. You're not just getting like packets of teas and bone broth. You're getting for breakfast, for example, a whole nut-based bar. You'll get snacks like olives and crackers and things like that. You'll get for lunch and for dinner, you'll get plant-based soups. They're actually quite hearty. We just the Prolon team came out with a already ready to eat soup that has whole beans and things like that in there too. So it's actually quite hearty. And then even at the end of the day, you'll finish with like a little chocolate crisp or a dessert of some sort. So all of those things you can have in a day, and your body will still believe that you're in a fasted state, which is pretty incredible. And the beauty is that you don't have to cook anything, you don't have to think about anything. You just have to start.
And is the timing so in relation to an individual when they're taking the meals or taking the treat at the end of the day? I mean, is there a time set for them to take them, or can they take them at any period? I know we're mentioning it in terms of mimicking fasting, but do they still have to stick to guidelines of a certain time throughout the day?
Not necessarily. The all of the studies that I've mentioned, they don't restrict the individual to having any item at a specific time of the day. You can kind of mix and match as you wish. A lot of people will take, for example, their breakfast bar and have that for when they're on the go, which might be later on in the day. Or some people who notice that they feel more full after have the nut-based bar, they'll save that for before bed, so that they can have a nice night's sleep. So people can absolutely move things around throughout the day. But what is important is that you don't switch things between days. So they are day specific and the day is designed for that day. Each day is a little bit different than the last. So it is that is important. But within the day, you can move things around and you're not set to a specific hour that you have to have everything.
And are generally the feedback you've received, I mean, is the food like, is it palatable in terms of, and I mean that with all due respect, because sometimes you get a lot of the products will come in and, some people have certain tastes where if they have eaten a lot of sugary stuff and then all of a sudden they're eating this type of food, is the feedback kind of very positive that people are kind of, they're happy with the taste?
Yes, I would say 98% of people are happy. You know, you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
But there's still, for example, in the breakfast bar, and people are always surprised, but there's still a little bit of honey in the breakfast bar. And there's chocolate chips in the chocolate dessert. So it's still very palatable. The soups that were just recently launched by Prolon, those fully hydrated soups as part of their what they call their next generation kit were designed by a Michelin star chef. So
Okay.
they're quite impressive. I opened up one of those new soups when they first came out, and you immediately got this rush of tomato and basil, and it felt truly, and this sounds crazy, but it smelled like right out of the garden. So Prolon and its parent company Nutra has been around now for almost a decade, so they've been doing the best that they can to really perfect this so that it is as delicious as it can be. And I can say, as somebody who has done the fasting mimicking diet myself now 15 times, I will continue to do it with absolutely no problem on taste. It's not like you're forcing the food down.
And it's everybody, I mean, looking at you here in the camera, and your skin is glowing, you're happy, you're youthful. I mean, in terms of, did you always have this appearance throughout your life, or have you noticed a change by doing this mimicking fasting?
I absolutely have. So now I've never necessarily been significantly overweight, but I have gone through periods of my life where I wasn't as healthy as I am today. And for a wide number of reasons, I will say, even as recently as a year ago, my sleep was awful. It's been an evolution, as it is for in my opinion, everybody. There's always opportunity for growth, no matter how big or small. It's just about taking a step in the right direction. When I started doing the fasting mimicking diet, I noticed different things than I notice when I'm doing it today. So when I first started, some of the things that I noticed, because I had more weight to lose then, were, yes, weight loss. Now I notice things that are, I'll say in the middle, some of the things that I noticed, I had bumps on the back of my arm. And I never really knew why, but they were just there, and it didn't necessarily bother me so much, but they were noticeably there. And when I had finished probably maybe four or so rounds, completely gone. Completely gone. And if I actually, interestingly, if I wait too long between cycles, I'll notice them coming back.
Right.
Um, so it really is quite interesting in terms of that. I would argue is maybe a combination between immunity, autoimmunity, and skin health, which again, there's some really cool research on fasting mimicking and autoimmunity in models as diverse as IBD, multiple sclerosis, and things like that. That we've seen some really early but really positive results there. And now, what I notice more when I do this is the mental clarity piece, the heightened senses piece. I'll notice that around day 4 or day 5, my sense of smell is on high alert. I see things clearer, crisper, brighter. Um, you can taste things better. It's really impressive. And in fact, just a couple months ago, um, El Nutra came out with a study on chemosensory properties. What does that mean? It's essentially your ability to smell and taste. And they were able to show that with cycles of the fasting mimicking diet, they were able to improve the sense of taste and smell by 6x, 6 times better.
Wow.
And compared to a regular healthy diet alone, right? So this is really, really impressive. And that's probably, they even removed the fact that the patients had lost weight, because weight loss can also result in some of that improvement in sense of taste and smell, but they accounted for that and still saw statistically significant benefits there. And so the researchers suggest that this is likely because of activation of stem cells as well as the autophagy, which we see stem cell activation now really being more of an exploration with fasting, and really a huge opportunity here that, again, is super hard to do with pretty much any other intervention.
The ladies then, in terms of approaching perimenopause or menopause, um, I'm sorry, guys, leaving you out for this. I know you have andropause, but let's talk with the ladies here now. I'm so selfish. Have some gratitude. So in terms of the ladies, I mean, how can this help this fasting mimicking, or what's the research on that?
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm going to tie this a little bit back for the men listening out there, because the changes that women experience during perimenopause, yes, they are tied with very specific hormonal changes, right? But these hormonal changes, the drop in estrogen that women experience, are happening as a cause of aging, right? That it is part of the aging process, which no matter who you are, men or women, you are experiencing aging. And so while women will notice things like and this is generally again tied to the drop in estrogen, increased risk of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, or increased rates of muscle loss that are happening, which when you lose muscle, you also drop your metabolic rate, which also means that it is easier to gain fat by doing the exact same things you were doing before, which is why people are always like, I don't know why I'm eating the same, I'm working out the same, but I'm gaining weight and I don't know why. And it's very likely in part, well, yes, because of the drop in estrogen, but also because of that causing a drop in your total muscle tone. Now, those two things, that drop in muscle and also the increased risk of insulin resistance and risk of type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, also something that men will experience as they age as well. And what is really cool about the fasting mimicking diet is that not only is insulin resistance reduced, meaning that people become more insulin sensitive, meaning that people who are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes can actually go into remission, get off of their meds, and improve their HbA1c or their blood sugar metrics. But also that we see that they can lose weight, that they can protect their muscle. And this solution is able to kind of tackle, again, a really wide scope. Pushing back against the clock. And again, with that biological age piece, again, pushing back to the point where I've had, and this is unfortunately not clinically studied, but I have some case studies of the patients going through this where they see their cycle coming back, even if they've already entered, later stage of perimenopause or even menopause. And they notice, wow, I did a couple cycles of the fasting mimicking diet and my cycle came back. And it really is that's kind of, to me, one of the most incredible things to see in terms of reversing the clock there.
Well, most men would be delighted with that, I have to say. With all due respect. And I'm being nosy on the website here. So, prolonlife.com. They have you've products, there's science and benefits about us, there's a getting started quiz. So what's the getting started quiz about?
So the Getting Started quiz helps you understand what what would be the best fit for you to start. And that will consider, have you fasted before? What are your goals? All of those things can help with this company, Prolon, decide what items might be the best way for you to start. Not everybody necessarily needs to start with the 5 day fasting mimicking diet, which is kind of the gold standard, the starting product that was created that most people hear about because that's what all of that research is based off of is those 5 days. But if you've never done this before, maybe it would be better for you to try a 1 day reset and maybe do that once a week for 4 weeks before you transition to a 5 day kit. Maybe your goal is muscle growth. And so, yes, we want you to do a fasting mimicking diet, maybe, once a month for 3 months and then once every 4 months moving forward for, once you've gotten into that routine, you don't have to do it very often, but you will want to add in a adequate amount of protein in between rounds, making sure that you're also supporting weight bearing exercise. So, these are all things that are considered as part of the quiz. I think it's a really cool way to help guide you to the right way to start. And then, if you still have questions, both Prolon and L Nutra Health, whether you're going to Prolon's customer service department or you're going to L Nutra Health, they even have people that you can just call on the spot and chat with them to hear about the programs and hear about, whether or not it might be a good fit for you. Ask for guidance, ask for help. Prolon now has a free group coaching to help walk you through the whole experience every single day. And L Nutra Health includes 2 visits with a dietitian every single month, one-on-one. So if you want that personalized guidance, you can get it. So there's so many resources available to make this as simple as possible. Already, just the kit delivered to your door with everything organized by day makes it easy. But, having additional support and guidance also has been, of course, is really, really helpful.
Yeah, I mean it's easy peasy, especially with the busy lifestyle and schedules that majority of people have, and it's nice to know that you're actually getting something nutritious and will have a benefit for you in the long term. And there's also a shop there for any listeners there. You can click on the shop. They have all the products there available. And as we spoke before recording, with Renee just confirming that it is available. We can get it in the United States and we can get it in other countries as well. Is best place to get in touch with you, Renee? Because I mean, you're a fountain of knowledge and information. I mean, do you kind of try to stay away from that side of it where individuals can get in touch with you directly and kind of burn your brain and your ears in terms of what's the best way to be healthy in life, or are you open to that type of stuff?
No, I would love for anybody who has questions, ideas, reach out to me. Absolutely. I have walked thousands of people through fasting mimicking diets at this point, and it is a true passion of mine. I would be happy to support anybody who's interested in doing this. You can reach me. The best way is honestly via Instagram. My Instagram is Fitton Nutrition, Fitton Nutrition. But you can also reach me on my website at fittonnutrition.com. And if you have any questions just generally about fasting mimicking from either of those two companies, Prolon is at prolonlife.com. But for our European listeners, it's going to be prolon.eu. And then there is also that L Nutra Health site, which is L-Nutra, Nutra health.com. And that's going to be for anybody that has my kind of the way that I usually tell people to determine which in the fork in the road, which way do you go, is if you are a generally healthy person who is looking for longevity, maybe to lose a couple pounds, but nothing too, significant, you should definitely take a peek at Prolon. If you are somebody who has type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, if your doctor has said, oh, your blood pressure is looking like it's getting up there, we might want, if you've been put on any medications for metabolic health programs or problems, then you'll want to go check out L Nutra Health, where you'll get additional support, you'll get labs, you'll get medication review, you'll get all the extra bells and whistles to make sure that you're doing this as safely as possible.
Ah, brilliant. Absolutely delighted to chat with you today, Renee. What I'll do is, as soon as the podcast is released and approved, I'll put all the links in. You can hound Renee on a daily basis, ask her all these questions. One last thing, I'll kind of introduce this now. If you couldn't do what you're doing now, what was the one dream you had that you haven't fulfilled yet? What was the one thing you, like, was it sports? Was it going to space? Was it being an actress, a singer? Was it anything? Anything that you
You
wanted to
know,
do?
I feel like I have done a lot of the things that I had wanted to do. And oh, that's not true. When I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be an orthodontist. That
Wow.
was but it doesn't feel unfulfilled because I don't think I would want to do that now. But what I will say is that today I I travel a lot and I love escape rooms. So I would love to be an escape room reviewer. I think that would be so cool.
That'd be cool, actually. Yeah, yeah. No, anybody out there wants a ready to be an escape room reviewer, you can get in touch with her.
Yeah,
That,
exactly. And there is a whole world out there, by the way, which I have started to uncover that this is in fact a job. So, I might have to look back on that one.
well done to you. So, also we say thanks so much to Renee Fitton for chatting today on the Wellbeing Quibo podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.